Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rechak Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 2nd Maccabees, the 12th chapter. When these covenants were made, Lysias went on to the king, and the Jews were about their husbandry. So basically, Lysias went report to the king. The Jews continued to live their lives, and everything was all sweet. But of the governors of several places, Timotheus and Apollonius, the son of Genius, also Hieronymus and Demophon, and beside them Nicanor, the governor of Cyprus, would not suffer them to be quiet and live in peace. Yet they still wanted trouble with us. The men of Joppa also did such an ungodly deed. They prayed the Jews that dwelt among them to go with their wives and children into the boats which they had prepared. So basically, like to go on like a small voyage with them, as though they had meant them no hurt. Right? It's like a community thing. Let's all do it. Who accepted of it according to the common decree of the city, because everybody was on board with it. So they managed to convince the Israelites that are among them, to go with them in this, on to sea, as being desirous to live in peace and suspecting nothing. But when they were gone forth into the deep, they drowned no less than 200 of them. So basically, when they got there into the midst of the water, then they took advantage and they drowned the Jews. When Judas heard of this cruelty done unto his countrymen, he commanded those that were with him to make them ready. And calling upon God, the righteous judge, he came against those murderers of his brethren, and burnt the haven by night, because that's what Joppa was, and set the boats on fire, and those that fled thither he slew. And when the town was shut up, he went backward, as if he would return to root out all of them of the city of Joppa. So basically, after he had, he had attacked and slew them, it says here, as if he would return to root them all out. So he had like the intention of coming back and completely, taking them all out. But before he could do that, when he heard that the Jamnites were minded to do like manner unto the Jews that dwelt among them, he came upon the Jamnites also by night, and set fire on the haven and the navy, so that the light of the fire was seen at Jerusalem 240 furlongs off. So basically, he heard, all right, this other neighboring city is trying to do the same thing. So he's like, look, I gotta basically go get him, right? So he had to back off of Joppa for a second. Now, when they were gone from thence 9 furlongs in their journey toward Timotheus, because that he was also coming after them, no fewer than 5,000 men on foot and 500 horsemen of the Arabians set upon him. Whereupon there was a very sore battle. So on their way, you have the Arabians that basically intercept them to come and attack them. But Judas's side, by the help of God, got the victory, so that the nomads of Arabia, being overcome, besought Judas for peace, promising both to give him cattle and to pleasure him otherwise, i.e., to give him, other things of other forms of riches, right? So basically, they came and attacked us. We beat their ass, and they decided to yield and to give us spoils. Then Judas, thinking indeed that they would be profitable in many things, granted them peace. Right? So he thought about it. He said, you know what? These guys are very resourceful. All right. Whereupon they shook hands, and so they departed to their tents. He went also about to make a bridge to a certain strong city, which was fenced about with walls and inhabited by people of diverse countries. And the name of it was Caspis. So it was like a low-key melting pot where you had different nations up in there. But they that were within it put such trust in the strength of the walls and provision of victuals. So they're thinking, look, these walls are impenetrable. Plus, we got food for decades. that they behaved themselves rudely toward them that were with Judas, railing and blaspheming, and uttering such words as were not to be spoken. Wherefore Judas with his company, calling upon the great Lord of the world, who without rams or engines of war did cast down Jericho in the time of Joshua, gave a fierce assault against the walls. Right? So the same God who brought down the walls of Jericho without, weapon, those are the ones that's the one Judas called upon, and took the city by the will of God, and made unspeakable slaughters, insomuch that a lake 2 furlongs broad near adjoining thereunto, being filled full, was seen running with blood. So there was so much bloodshed that a nearby lake full of water turned to blood, basically, because all that blood flowed from the city, into that lake, into that body of water. Then departed they from thence 750 furlongs, and came to Charica, unto the Jews that were called Tubani. But as for Timotheus, they found him not in the places. So his demon as was fleeing from place to place. For before he had dispatched anything, he departed from thence, having left a very strong, very very strong garrison in a certain hold. So he ended up fleeing from there before Judas got to him, but he left a garrison, okay, to maintain or hold down that fort or that fortress. Howbeit, Dosithius and Sosipater, who were of Maccabees' captains, went forth and slew those that Timotheus had left in the fortress, above 10,000 men. So that garrison that he left there, they went in there and slew those men. And Maccabeus ranged his army by bands and set them over the bands, and went against Timotheus. So he basically broke up his army into different groups, different sections. And then he set the captains over the different groups or the different bands, and went against Timotheus, who had about him 120,000 men of foot. So Timotheus had a defense of about 120,000 men, footmen, and 2,500 horsemen. Now when Timotheus had knowledge of Judas's coming, he sent the women and children and the other baggage onto a fortress called Carnion. For the town was hard to besiege and uneasy to come onto, by reason of the straitness of all the places. But when Judas, his first band, came in sight, the enemies, being smitten with fear and terror, I mean, they were terrified at even the thought of of Judas. It says here, in terror through the appearing of him, who seeth all things, fled amain. So they got so afraid they started running. But check it. It says here, one running into this way, another that way, so that they that were often hurt of their own men, and wounded with the points of their own swords. So they started out of fear. They started tweaking out so much. They were running into each other, stabbing each other up, basically in this like panic state. Judas also was very earnest in pursuing them, killing those wicked wretches, of whom he slew about 30,000 men. Moreover, Timotheus himself fell into the hands of Dosithius and Sosipater, whom he besought with much craft to let him go with his life. So those two captains of Judas's army, eventually they got their hands on Timotheus, and using deceitful words, he basically requested that they should let him go. They shouldn't kill him, because he had many of the Jews' parents and the brethren of some of them, who, if they put him to death, should not be regarded. So if they killed him, they wouldn't get those hostages back. So when he had assured them with many words that he would restore them without hurt, according to the agreement, they let him go for the saving of their brethren. So like a exchange. So they let him live, and in exchange they would get those hostages. Then Maccabeus marched forth to Carnion and to the temple of Artargates, and there he slew 25,000 persons. And after he had put to flight and destroyed them, Judas removed the host toward Ephron, a strong city, wherein Lysias abode, and a great multitude of diverse nations. And the strong young men kept the walls, defending them mightily, right? Because when you go to besiege a city, it's not just that they have walls, they also have people that are on the walls that are preventing the enemy from scaling up the walls with ladders and getting close. So these men were defending the city, wherein also was great provision of engines and darts, that is, within that city. So they were well prepared. But when Judas and his company had called upon Almighty God, who with his power breaketh the strength of his enemies, they won the city, and slew 25,000 of them that were within. From thence they departed to Scythopolis, which lieth 600 furlongs from Jerusalem. But when the Jews that dwelt there had testified that the Scythopolitans dealt lovingly with them, so they didn't, cause any trouble for them. They were all good, and entreated them kindly in the time of their adversity. They gave them thanks, desiring them to be friendly still unto them. And so they came to Jerusalem, the Feast of Weeks approaching. So when Judas and his men got there, they heard a good report of the people there from their brethren, the Jews. So they say, you know what? All right, hey, thank you. You keep on, being on good terms with them, and we ain't got no problems. So they came back to Jerusalem. And after the feast called Pentecost, they went forth against Gorgias, the governor of Idumea, who came out with 3,000 men of foot and 400 horsemen. And it happened that in their fighting together, a few of the Jews were slain. So some of the Jews in Judas' army died. At which time Dositheus, one of Beccanor's company, who was on horseback and a strong man, was still upon Gorgias, and taking hold of his coat, drew him by force. So you can imagine, right? He's running on his horse. He catches up on the battlefield to Gorgias, or Gorgias, grabs him, right, while he's on the horse, and he basically pulls him, right, by his clothing. And when he would have taken that cursed man alive, right, just as he had him in his hand, a horseman of Thracia coming upon him smote off his shoulder, so that Gorgias fled on to Marissa. So as he was holding him, this horseman comes probably with a sword and basically, as it says, smote off his shoulder. That is to slice his blade, right? Either completely cutting off the arm or damaging it enough to where he had to release or let go. He couldn't hold on any longer to Gorgias and allow Gorgias to escape. Now when they that were with Gorgias had fought long and were weary, Judas called upon the Lord that he would shew himself to be their helper and leader of the battle. And with that he began in his own language and sung psalms with a loud voice, and rushing unawares upon Gorgias' men, he put them to flight. So Judas gathered his host and came into the city of Odalam, and when the 7th day came, they purified themselves as the custom was, and kept the Sabbath in the same place. And upon the day following, as the use had been, Judas and his company came to take up the bodies of them that were slain, and to bury them with their kinsmen in their fathers' graves. Now under the coats of every one that was slain, they found things consecrated to the idols of the Jamnites, which is forbidden the Jews by the law, because those would be an accursed thing. So these men that were slain had taken of those accursed things, which they weren't supposed to. Then every man saw that this was the cause whereof they were slain. They're like, this is why they ended up dying during the battle. It was judgment from the Lord. All men therefore praising the Lord, the righteous judge, who had opened the things that were hid, meaning he made known the secret thing, right? He made known why it is this happened to them, because they didn't know that these men had taken of those accursed things. It says here, betook themselves unto prayer, and besought him that the sin committed might wholly be put out of remembrance, that the Lord might just, they're dead. May he pardon this and not make this an occasion to bring judgment upon the nation. Besides that noble Judas exhorted the people to keep themselves from sin. Remember, he was a Levite. For so much as they saw before their eyes the things that came to pass for the sins of those that were slain. So he exhorted them, this is why you stay away from sin, as you've seen an example here as to what happened to these people who got greedy. And when they had made a gathering throughout the company to the sum of 2,000 drachms of silver, they sent it to Jerusalem to offer a sin offering, doing therein very well and honestly, in that he was mindful of the resurrection. So Judas, being mindful that these men, as is going to go into, that died, would have to come back again on the earth. He knew that. For if he had not hoped that they that were slain should have risen again, it had been superfluous and vain to pray for the dead. Because if once they died, that was it, there would be no point in praying for them. But he knew that they would have to come back again, and they would have to serve judgment for the things they did in a previous life. So having done this sin wherewith they were slain, he basically made a sin offering for them, verse 45, and also in that he perceived that there was great favor laid up for those that died godly, it was an holy and good thought. Whereupon he made a reconciliation for the dead, that they might be delivered from sin, so that peradventure mercy can be given them when they come back again on the earth. Because the scriptures tell you that what you do in this body, you go before the Lord and you get a judgment for it, whether it's good or bad. So being that they sinned, he basically made a sin offering for them, that the Lord may forgive them for that, so that they don't have to suffer, some crazy judgment in the next life. And that brings us to the end of the book of 2 Maccabees, the 12th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.